What is up, everybody? Jeremy Eisenfire here, and welcome to the channel. With Season 3 of From just around the corner now, fans have been dying to get their hands on some of the answers to the bigger mysteries that the show has been setting up. And perhaps one of the biggest mysteries that has still yet to be resolved is the mystery of these mysterious monsters that come out of the forest at night and what their true origin are. When we meet the monsters on From, we start to notice they showcase some very interesting characteristics, some that we have seen in other pop culture monsters, while other characteristics paint these monsters in a much more mysterious and much more sinister light. Like how they not only want to kill their victims, but seemingly want to hunt and torture them as well. It's looking like fear might be a primary motive for these creatures. But just what exactly do we know definitively about these beings, and can we use some of that information to determine their origin? And to that end, I suppose we should start with what exactly the inspiration for the monsters was in the first place. And to do that, I need to introduce you to a famous English painter named Francis Bacon.
We started off with that image of the Pope by Francis Bacon, the English painter. I always thought he was painting people on the inside, not the outside.
According to director Jack Bender, it was one of Francis Bacon's paintings of the Screaming Pope, a depiction of Pope Innocent X, which was a heavy inspiration for the monsters. And as you can see from the painting, you can definitely see some of the inspiration that carried over into the final design of these creatures. But upon taking a closer look at what Francis Bacon's work is trying to usually invoke, I start to wonder if they took some deeper inspiration beyond just the aesthetics. It is said that Bacon's paintings often depict surreal or even dreamlike images that are meant to blur the line between the conscious and unconscious mind, and how he employs a clever usage of distorted or even disfigured scenes to create a sense of unease or ambiguity, in hopes of reflecting the human psyche. And much like Francis Bacon's work, it seems like the show From is also starting to dive into the realm of the conscious and unconscious mind. We have been getting tons of hints and foreshadowings ever since the show first began to dreams and dreamlike states, and in particular, nightmares. We hear the town referred to as a nightmare on more than one occasion, and many of our characters seem to be having nightmares that seemingly have real-world consequences when they wake up. And this is where I believe dreams and nightmares could have a connection to these creatures. After all, the official designation of the monster's name is Nightmare Creature. And when we take a closer look at these monsters, it does almost look like they may have been plucked directly out of someone's nightmare. On the surface, they begin to appear like your average monster, with fangs, claws, shape-shifting abilities, and the need to not only kill, but also hunt and torture their victims as well. But when we start to look a little bit deeper at some of these creatures, we start to notice some other characteristics that are very interesting to say the least, and not the least of which would be their intelligence. One thing we learn pretty early on about these creatures is not only are they incredibly savage and dangerous, but they are also extremely clever as well, and have even been known to change their tactics at times to adapt to their new surroundings. One thing we learn in Season 1 is how vastly different the monsters used to act before Boyd arrived and found the talisman, and how the monsters used to spend all night screaming and howling, most likely a scare tactic attempt to get some of the humans to hopefully reveal their location. After all, before the talismans, they did not have houses that they could go and retreat to at night. They had to find any old hiding spot they can and pray for the best. Yet after the talismans were discovered, the townsfolk noticed a subtle change within the monsters and how they started to behave. Instead of screeching all night, they started to rely much more on their human form and much more on manipulation tactics to get people to open their doors willingly. As the townsfolk quickly found out, the monsters were incredibly intelligent and seemed to know things about each and every one of them that they probably shouldn't have known, including names and personal information on almost every survivor. And the monsters were very clever at using that information to their advantage to manipulate certain people to letting them in. as we see in the very first episode of From when young Megan gets manipulated to open her window. And later on in Season 1, we also see one of the monsters named Jasmine employ some very interesting tactics by tricking one of the members of Colony House into opening up the window to let her in, which she successfully does, and the rest of the monsters follow. So, as we've seen, they're not only incredibly dangerous, but incredibly clever as well. So the question remains, just where exactly did these monsters come from? And I think the name of the monsters, Nightmare Creature, might have been a bigger hint than we might have originally thought. In Season 2, we start to see that dreams can affect people in the real world, and we also hear a very interesting theory from Sarah, stating that when people die, their fears can physically be manifested in the forest, as that is where she believes the cicadas came from after her brother Nathan died, as he was deathly afraid of cicadas. And we are certainly starting to see more evidence that this might not be outside of the realm of possibility. After all, in Season 2, we see Elgin is pushed underwater and held by this demonic-looking creature until he wakes back up in his real bed and spits out a ton of water that he brought with him from the dream. And then we also see Kenny have a similar experience as well, as in one of his dreams, he gets burnt by one of the screaming hot cicadas and wakes up in the real world with the burn mark still on his arm, showcasing to us that things can indeed be pulled from dreams into the real world. And could that potentially be why these monsters are named nightmare creatures? Were these beings potentially plucked directly from someone's nightmare? And if so, just whose nightmare did they originate from? On that front, your guess is as good as mine, but I do have a few ideas that I will be doing a part 2 on in the future. But definitely let me know your thoughts and comments down below. Do you think these monsters could have been plucked directly from someone's nightmare? Or do you have another origin in mind for the monsters? I think we all can agree that they have been one of the most fascinating new creatures that we have been introduced to in a very long time. But that is going to do it today for our tinfoil theory on where the monsters could have potentially come from. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like on your way out and consider subscribing to stay up to date on all of our upcoming From content. And until next time, keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and I will see you on the next one.
You said this place couldn't break you. That's what you said. Let's see.
You're so strong. You're so strong. Just no. I know.